Imagine spending tens of thousands fixing a house, only for the people in charge to refuse to pay you. But the very next day, you turned the tables in a way they never saw coming. This is the story of one bold move that left a homeowners association stunned. John had spent months transforming a neglected lakefront property into the dream retreat he always imagined. The house had seen better days: faded siding, warped floors, leaky windows, and a deck that creaked with every step. But John was determined. Every nail he hammered, every plank he sanded, every coat of paint he brushed onto the walls was a promise to restore the home to its former glory. Friends and neighbors watched in awe as the house slowly transformed, and even the lake seemed to sparkle a little brighter as the renovations took shape. By the time he finished, the property looked like something out of a magazine. The deck gleamed, the roof shone under the sun, and the interior exuded warmth and elegance. John stepped back, breathing in the fresh scent of wood and paint, proud of every detail. He felt satisfied, not just because of the work itself, but because he had done it with integrity, care, and skill. He knew the property was now worth every penny he had poured into it. Confident, John prepared the bill and submitted it to the HOA, $28,500, a figure that reflected the labor, materials, and expertise invested. He imagined the HOA reviewing it, nodding in approval, and promptly issuing payment. Perhaps they would even commend him for the quality of his work. Gratitude, recognition, fairness. He expected all of it. Instead, the response was a cold, terse letter. "Policy reasons," it read, "cannot approve payment at this time." The language was bureaucratic and sterile, designed to frustrate rather than explain. No apologies, no acknowledgement of his effort. John stared at the page, disbelief coursing through him. Months of painstaking labor, and now his hard-earned money was trapped in red tape. For a moment, he considered giving up. The frustration burned in his chest, the unfairness of it all pressing down like the heavy summer humidity over the lake. But as he paced the deck, watching the water ripple under the morning sun, a new thought took shape. This wasn't the end of the story. The HOA thought they could dismiss him with a letter. They had no idea that John was not the kind of person to be ignored. He had a plan, and it was bold, precise, and ready to make them rethink every policy, loophole, and decision they thought would shield them from accountability. Anger simmered beneath John's calm exterior, a slow burning heat that refused to fade. He had always prided himself on thinking before acting, on weighing every decision carefully rather than reacting in the moment. But this wasn't a small disagreement over paint colors or lawn maintenance. It was tens of thousands of dollars of his hard-earned money dismissed with bureaucratic coldness. The unfairness of it gnawed at him, refusing to let him sleep. That night, John sat at his desk, a notebook open and pen in hand, sketching out every possible course of action. He mapped out scenarios, considered legal avenues, and even the possibility of hiring a lawyer. But as he scribbled, one thought kept returning, clear and insistent. The HOA controlled access to the lake houses. They held the keys, the codes, the authority, but they had become complacent, careless, arrogant even. They never imagined anyone would challenge them directly, let alone turn the tables. John leaned back, staring at the moonlit lake through his window. Its surface glimmered, reflecting the calm of the night. And yet, beneath that calm, the water hid power and depth, just like the plan forming in his mind. A daring idea began to take shape, audacious in its simplicity, legal yet impossible to ignore. What if they could feel a fraction of the frustration he had endured? What if they were forced to confront the consequences of their own bureaucratic arrogance? The next morning, John didn't storm into the HOA office with anger blazing in his eyes. He didn't shout, threaten, or demand. Instead, he moved with calm precision, each step measured, his demeanor that of someone who had rehearsed every detail. He walked to the security gate, the keys in his pocket, and paused for a moment to breathe in the crisp morning air. Around him, the lake houses gleamed, the lawns freshly trimmed, their owners blissfully unaware that today their weekend plans were about to take an unexpected turn. In that moment, as he glanced at the gate and then at the peaceful houses beyond it, John felt a thrill, not from malice, but from empowerment. This was his chance to reclaim control, to send a clear message without a single raised voice. One thought dominated his mind, audacious and precise. What if they had a taste of their own medicine? The idea wasn't just satisfying, it was a statement, and John was ready to make it happen. Using a little-known technicality buried deep within the HOA's rulebook, John executed his plan with precision. Every word, every clause had been studied, analyzed, and turned to his advantage. Legally, he had the authority to temporarily revoke access to the lake houses, and strategically, it was the perfect leverage. He didn't take the action lightly. It was calculated, careful, and entirely within the bounds of the law, but it carried a weight that would make the HOA rethink their assumptions about control and entitlement. By mid-morning, the scene was set. The lakefront neighborhood, usually buzzing with weekend energy, remained quiet, almost deceptively peaceful. That tranquility was about to shatter. As members of the HOA began arriving, anticipation in the air was thick. They expected a weekend of relaxation, boating, and laughter. Instead, what greeted them was a locked gate and a formal notice, crisp and immovable. Administrative action in effect, it read. The language was neutral, almost bureaucratic, but the message was undeniable. They were temporarily barred from their own properties. Shock rippled through the community like a sudden summer storm. Conversations froze mid-sentence, phone calls were interrupted, and messages flew across group chats. The people who had dismissed John's $28,500 repair bill were now facing the consequences of their own oversight. Panic struck through the offices and homes alike. Members scoured the rulebook, fingers tracing paragraphs and subparagraphs, only to find that John had anticipated every loophole, every potential countermeasure. The very rules they had ignored when it suited them were now the tools of their own temporary exclusion. Meanwhile, John observed quietly from a distance, a mixture of satisfaction and calm determination etched on his face. He wasn't gloating, he was proving a point. The power dynamic had shifted, if only for a moment. The people who had dismissed his efforts, who had ignored months of work and tens of thousands of dollars in bills, were now experiencing firsthand what it felt like to be held accountable. The scene was chaotic, yet methodical, a mirror of the frustration John himself had endured. Every call, every email, every confused homeowner reinforced the lesson he had vowed to deliver. Respect the work of others, or risk being locked out, literally. The HOA couldn't believe what had just unfolded. Members who once had dismissed John's painstaking work and the staggering $28,500 repair bill were now facing the consequences of their own oversight. Panic rippled through the offices and homes alike. Members attempted to argue, citing technicalities and procedural exceptions, but their voices lacked conviction. They were no longer in control. Others begged, their voices shaking, hoping to convince John to reverse his actions. But John remained unshaken. Calmly, firmly, he reminded them of the ignored bill, of the time, energy, and money he had invested, and the basic principle they had overlooked: fairness. Outside the HOA offices, the story spread quickly. Neighbors whispered in disbelief, sharing the news like a wildfire of astonishment. Within hours, social media feeds were flooded with screenshots of the notice John had posted at the gates. People debated his audacity, admired his cleverness, and marveled at the precision of his actions. The lakefront community buzzed with excitement, curiosity, and a sense of justice finally served. John had become a symbol, not of malice, but of accountability. His story turned into the neighborhood's cautionary tale, a vivid lesson that dismissing the hard work of others could carry unexpected consequences. Despite the drama and the chaos, John made it clear that his actions were not fueled by revenge. Sitting on the deck of his fully restored property, he explained to anyone willing to listen that this was never personal. It was about fairness, about holding people accountable, and about demonstrating that ignoring obligations has consequences. Letters and polite reminders had failed. Bureaucracy had provided no remedy. When all else failed, action, bold, calculated, and within the rules, was the only way to send a message loud enough to be heard. Sometimes, he said, actions speak louder than words. By the end of the week, the HOA relented. Payments were issued, and an official acknowledgement of John's work arrived, accompanied by a formal apology. But the impact went beyond money. The neighborhood had learned a lesson. Respect those who put in the effort, and don't take diligence for granted.